In 2016, a man in the UK won £6 million on the lottery. He did everything people tell you to do. He told his family first, then his closest friends. Then, slowly, without him even deciding to, it leaked to everyone else. Within 18 months, his marriage was over. His phone never stopped ringing. Strangers he hadn't spoken to in a decade suddenly remembered they were close. He eventually left the country not to spend his fortune, but to escape the people trying to take it from him. He didn't lose his money to bad investments. He didn't lose it to taxes. He lost his peace over one single decision, he told people. Before we go further, a quick note. This video is for education and general understanding only. It is not financial, legal, or psychological advice, and nothing here should replace guidance from a qualified, licensed professional who knows your specific situation. Now, let's get into it. Here's what we're going to cover in the next 15 minutes. Why money is never just a number, and why telling people about it changes how they treat you whether they mean it to or not. Who, specifically, tends to cause the most damage once they learn what you've saved and it's not who you'd expect. What actually happens to lottery winners once their names become public, according to real research. Why even financial advisors, the people we're told to trust completely, can quietly become a risk. A brand new psychological pattern researchers are calling money dysmorphia, and how it's connected to everything we just talked about. And finally, why the wealthiest people alive in 2026 are dressing, spending, and living more quietly than at any point in the last 2 decades, and what that tells you about where real financial security actually comes from. Let's start with the psychology, because everything else in this video builds on it. Money is never just a number in a bank account. It's a scoreboard. Since the earliest human tribes, status has been tied to visible resources: who had the most food, the most cattle, the biggest shelter. Our brains never fully updated for a world where resources now means a number on a banking app instead of a pile of grain. So when you tell someone how much you've saved, their brain doesn't process it as neutral information. It processes it as a comparison. Am I ahead of this person or behind them? That single unconscious calculation is the root of almost everything that goes wrong when people talk about money. Psychologists call this social comparison theory, and decades of research keep confirming the same thing: people don't judge their financial success in absolute terms. They judge it relative to the people around them. Someone earning $120,000 a year can feel poor next to friends earning $200,000. Someone earning $40,000 can feel wealthy next to a circle earning $25,000. This is why revealing your savings almost never produces the reaction you expect. You think you're sharing good news. What the listener's brain actually receives is a quiet threat to their own self-image, and threatened brains don't usually respond with joy. They respond with envy, distance, or resentment, sometimes even in people who genuinely love you. Now let's talk about exactly who tends to react this way, because the pattern is remarkably consistent. Colleagues are first. Office relationships run on a kind of unspoken equality: similar salaries, similar struggles, shared complaints about the same boss. The moment a coworker learns you've quietly built serious savings, that equality disappears. Suddenly, you're expected to pick up the check. Suddenly, you're not one of us anymore, you're the one who's set. Family is next, and this one surprises people the most. You'd assume family is the safest group of all. But family systems run on decades-old dynamics: who was the responsible one, who was the favorite, who made it and who didn't. The moment money enters that system, it rarely stays private information. It becomes ammunition, or it becomes an obligation. One casual mention at a dinner table, and within a week, relatives who haven't called in years suddenly have a small favor to ask. New relationships are the third danger zone. Revealing significant savings too early doesn't just risk exploitation, it quietly shifts the power dynamic of the relationship before trust has had time to develop naturally. And here's the pattern underneath all three groups. None of these people are necessarily bad people. Most of them aren't villains. They're just human beings whose behavior changes, often without them even realizing it. The moment they learn someone nearby has more than they assumed. Nowhere is this more visible or more studied than in lottery winners, because sudden, publicly known wealth is basically a real-world experiment in what happens when privacy disappears overnight. For years, the popular myth was that most winners end up broke and miserable. The real research tells a more layered story. A large study out of Stockholm University followed thousands of lottery winners for years and found that, financially, most of them handled their money far more responsibly than the myth suggests. Sudden wealth alone doesn't destroy people. What actually destroys people is exposure. The winners who struggled most weren't the ones who spent recklessly, they were the ones whose winnings became public knowledge. Once a name and a number are attached to a jackpot, winners describe the same pattern over and over. Distant relatives reappear. Old friends resurface. Strangers write letters or show up in person asking for help. Saying no to a dozen people feels harsh. Saying no to 50 feels impossible. Saying yes to any of them opens the door to the rest. This is exactly why financial advisors who specialize in sudden wealth almost universally give the same first piece of advice. Before anything about investing or taxes, stay anonymous as long as the law allows, and tell almost no one for as long as you can. In more than half of U.S. states today, lottery winners are legally allowed to claim their prize through a trust or an LLC specifically to keep their name out of public record, a legal structure that exists because this exact problem is so well documented. There's a second, quieter danger, and it involves the very people we're told to trust with our money. Financial advisors are supposed to work entirely in your interest, and most genuinely do. But researchers who study financial advice have found a consistent pattern. The more vulnerable or urgent you sound, the more some advisors are tempted to steer you toward products that benefit them more than they benefit you. If you tell an advisor you feel behind on retirement and need to catch up fast, some may treat that urgency as an opening, recommending higher risk, higher commission products framed as catching up, when a slower, steadier strategy would actually serve you better. If you present yourself as someone who doesn't understand investing at all, that can invite a very different kind of advice than if you ask sharp, specific questions and demand plain language explanations. This doesn't mean avoid advisors. Most people genuinely need professional guidance. It means the same principle from earlier in this video applies here too. Share only what's necessary for someone to do their job well, not your entire financial story out of nervousness or misplaced trust. Now here's something newer, and it's directly connected to everything we've just covered. Researchers and financial psychologists have started using a term called money dysmorphia, a distorted gap between how financially secure someone actually is and how secure they feel. And the data behind it is strange. A recent nationwide survey found that over a third of people who reported serious financial anxiety actually had more than $10,000 in savings, well above the national median. In other words, plenty of people who are objectively doing fine still feel constantly behind. The single biggest driver researchers point to is social media watching a non-stop stream of other people's vacations, purchases, and curated success, and unconsciously using it as your own measuring stick. Nearly half of younger adults surveyed say they feel financially behind, even when their actual numbers say otherwise. This connects directly back to the first part of this video. If simply scrolling past someone else's flaunted wealth online is enough to create real anxiety in a total stranger, imagine the effect of a friend, a coworker, or a family member telling you, directly and specifically, exactly how much more they have than you. Flaunting money doesn't just risk making other people jealous. In 2026, we now have real data showing it can genuinely damage other people's mental health, which is one more reason the quiet approach isn't just self-protective. It's considerate. And this brings us to the most current part of the story. For most of the last decade, wealth culture was about visibility, loud logos, flashy cars, watches built to be recognized from across a room. That era is largely over. Walk through any major fashion district in 2026, and the shift is unmistakable. The most expensive wardrobes in the room increasingly carry no visible branding at all. This is the stealth wealth, or quiet luxury, movement, and this year it has stopped being a niche aesthetic and become the dominant language of real money. Resale markets show something telling. Logo-heavy luxury goods are losing value faster than understated, craftsmanship-driven pieces. People with real money are quite literally paying to look like they don't have any. Even luxury automakers have reported rising demand for badge-free versions of high-end vehicles, not because buyers can't afford recognition, but because visible wealth can attract exactly the kind of unwanted attention we've been describing this whole video. 3 forces drove this shift. Economic anxiety after years of inflation made visible spending feel tone-deaf. Social media itself created a kind of fatigue, with audiences increasingly reading loud spending as insecurity rather than success. And a new generation of wealth, built quietly through tech and long-term investing, simply never bought into the logo culture of the previous decade. In other words, the instinct to save quietly and live quietly isn't an outdated idea from a frugal grandparent. In 2026, it has become the actual signature of how the most financially secure people choose to move through the world. So what does this actually look like in practice? None of this means total secrecy or cutting off every honest conversation about money that would be its own kind of unhealthy. The goal isn't silence for its own sake. It's control over the story. A spouse or long-term life partner should generally know the real financial picture, because transparency there builds trust and secrecy there erodes it. Everyone outside that inner circle gets progressively less detail the further out they are. If someone asks how much you've saved, a vague, warm non-answer closes the conversation without creating a comparison point for anyone to react to. Let your lifestyle stay boring. Visible spending is the fastest leak of financial information there is. You don't need to announce your savings if your car, your clothes, and your home never announce it for you. Be selective even with professionals. Share the facts they need to build your plan, not your fears or your family history. And if a windfall ever comes your way, an inheritance, a bonus, a lucky break, remember the lottery research applies directly to you. The danger period is the first year, before people know. Use every tool available, structural or simply your own silence, to buy yourself time to think clearly before the information becomes permanent and public. Here's the uncomfortable truth this whole video has been building toward. Talking about money rarely makes you closer to the people around you. More often, it quietly rearranges how they see you and how they behave toward you, in ways neither of you asked for. The people who build real, lasting wealth aren't hiding out of shame. They're protecting something fragile, the ability to make their own financial decisions at their own pace without an audience of opinions, expectations, and hidden agendas. So the next time you hit a savings milestone, the next time the number in your account finally makes you proud, remember what the lottery winners learned the hard way, what researchers have measured for years, and what the wealthiest people alive in 2026 are quietly proving with the very clothes on their backs. You don't need an audience to know your money is working. You just need it to keep working quietly.